As always, I'll be taking your calls in the second hour, and as always, TGC is glad to be a part of the UFO Paranormal Radio Network. So please check out tgcradio.com. Hope to see you there.
Whoa! Did you hear?
Listen to the Church of Mavis radio show, hosted by Jeffrey Pritchett, 11 p.m. Eastern, Saturday nights. Follow your weird and journey into the high strange. Be sure to stop by www.churchofmavisradio.com for upcoming shows, paranormal news, and show archives. That's www.churchofmavisradio.com.
Hey! Hi there. Got your attention? I'm Gia Scott, and I was curious what you were doing from 7 to 9 p.m. Central Time on Tuesdays. See, I host this really interesting little radio program that airs live then, and we bring in all sorts of guests, authors, experiencers, and everything in between. It's paranormal and guaranteed to make you go, My guest list is always up at www.giascott.com, and do tune in to the Dawn of Shades from 7 to 9 p.m. on Tuesdays.
Tune in to The Mind Cemetery with your hosts, Chip and Nicole, every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network. We delve into UFOs, abductions, ghosts, aliens, conspiracies, and cryptozoology.
And how could you ever forget about those creepy topics you won't hear on your local news?
This is where I would insert my obligatory skeptical statement. The Mind Cemetery, where the paranoia about the paranormal comes to rest.
Follow us on Twitter and subscribe to us on Facebook. Also, check us out on our website, mindcemetery.com, for show updates and the critically acclaimed Mind Cemetery blog.
It's not critically acclaimed, but you should check it out anyway, mindcemetery.com.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Benetti, and along with Joe Montaldo, we host News on the Flip Side. Come join us every Saturday night at 7 p.m. Central for our 3-hour program. We have opinions on everything, and we're not afraid to share them. False history gets made all day, every day. The truth of the new is never on the news, but you can find it here with News on the Flip Side. Remember, don't be politically correct. Just be correct. Join us.
Tune in to UFO Undercover, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, with your host, Joe Montaldo, right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Another episode of the Dawn of Shades. And once again, we have got a fascinating topic tonight. But before we jump off to that conversation, we do have our usual announcements to make. For tonight's show, just like all the other shows, I would love to hear from the listening audience. So, you can send your questions and comments to me at Giascott, Giascott, at exogenynetwork.com, and that's spelled EXOGENYNETWORK.com. I promise I won't give out your full name or your email, and I won't send you spam, so don't be shy. I know that you have something on your mind that you would love to have the answer to. And don't forget, on Facebook, for all of you Facebookers out there, there is a group for the Dawn of Shades radio program, and that's where you can get all the fascinating updates. It's real easy to join and get them, and you can go there and do that too. I also have an author page, which you can go and click like on as well, showing me support for my written endeavors. And don't forget to email me directly, whether it's with questions for tonight's guest or about something else with the program. You can send that email off to giascott@exogenynetwork.com. Now, tonight, we've got another great guest, and you just might find the next book to put on your reading list while we're at it. So, without further ado, Christine McIntyre, welcome to the Dawn of Shades.
Hi, Gia. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. And would you be so kind as to introduce yourself to the audience?
Well, as you said, my name is Christine McIntyre. I just recently published my first novel called John Asleep, which you read, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I don't know, what else would you like to know?
Well, let's see. You better give them the title, where they can find it, and did you have your own website?
Yes, I do. It's johnasleep.com. But the book is also available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Smashwords, the regular indie publishing sites.
Okay.
Do I need to repeat that website address?
Yeah, go ahead and repeat that website address so everybody. Maybe you better spell it for them, too.
Okay, it's johnasleep.com, JAHNASLEEP.com.
And that's also the title of your book, which means that it's really easy to remember and associate the two together.
Yes.
So, I guess the first question would be, why did you decide to write a book? Don't you love tough questions? You just come out right away.
Yeah, really.
No warning. There it is.
No warning, no list. Why did I decide to write the book? This book in particular was a compelling story, and I needed to tell the story. I was driven, actually, to tell the story and wrote the manuscript, which turned out to be over 600 pages in a period of 60 days. So it literally poured out of me.
Well, that kind of makes sense. I tell everybody when they ask me, well, how did you write your book? I said, I dreamed it.
That happens too.
I dreamed it. They look at me like I'm a little crazy. I said, well, then the writing process, the physical process of writing, that was kind of like I was injured, and that was my first pain therapy. Was I would immerse myself in the physical process of writing it, which anybody who's done much writing realizes there's. Even though you've dreamed the story, you still have to, give it words and breathe life into it somehow. And by immersing myself into it, I could forget about pain.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
And, that makes perfect sense.
A lot of times too that for some people, I know some authors talk about, it was like emotional pain or this.
I was just going to mention that.
This traditional tortured artist sort of image that people have of artists, authors, creative people in general. Although I don't think you really need to be tortured to be creative. Personally, I'd rather skip that phase. I don't know about you. Do you see yourself as a tortured author or tortured artist of sorts?
Sometimes, depending on what my particular experience is and what I'm trying to express through my art, whether it's writing or painting, yes, definitely. This book, I have to admit, I hate to admit it, but it was part of a cathartic process, a therapeutic process, getting this story out. And really not for myself alone, but also for many other women, friends around me, other women that I met, who I saw were going through the same kinds of experiences. So, and as we all know, that, falling in love, especially when it turns out to be unrequited love, can be extremely painful. emotionally, psychologically, spiritually.
Yeah, or even, when you're in a relationship and, that traditional cheating thing and your house of cards comes apart, and then you look back on that relationship and you go, was everything the whole time, was it all based on lies? Where was the truth? Was I really that stupid, And most women and a lot of men, because I've had guy friends too that, went through a masculine version of the same scenario, but it was still the same scenario.
Yeah.
Same song, just different night. And, it's traumatic. And, then of course, too, there's the whole loss of faith thing, especially if you're someone that prefers to have people see you in terms of being a strong, independent, intelligent, with it kind of person. And if you're taken for a ride,
and you fall apart,
and not only do you fall apart, but you went on that ride, and people are looking at you, and they are, and they're like, how could you be that stupid? We knew months ago, and it's like, well, why didn't anybody tell me? Because you wouldn't listen.
Yeah.
And you really hate to admit it, but having been the friend that knew as well as the victim thereof many, many moons ago now, but, it's true. You won't believe it until you're ready to believe it, until it's in your face. You won't believe it anyhow. And, people go through that all the time, all this, agonizing relationship issues. And so many women feel that they are incomplete unless they have a complement, a partner. And, I'm lucky I never bought into that particular one. But I can freely admit now that I'm married, I had some serious commitment issues.
Married.
I'm married now. But yeah, I had some serious commitment issues going on. And maybe it was, I know part of it, that was a lifelong thing, but part of it also came from really bad. My first marriage was really bad, ended really badly. And, I got to go through all these really negative emotions. And now that it's been years and years, I got together with a bunch of friends. This is a cathartic event that you can talk about with friends sometimes, but everybody knew what had happened during the whole ending of that marriage. Because, unfortunately, sometimes things like that end up in the public eye,
Well, the thing is, you spill your guts.
Yeah, well, not only you spill your guts, in my case, it included a physical attack that, I pretty gruesome, for a while. So there was a lot of stuff going on. And when it was all over with, when the divorce was final, I had already made plans with my friend. We were friends. We were all going to get together. And I lived on the desert at the time. And we were going to burn an effigy and have a funeral. Now, this sounds really, really bizarre. But we were having a mock funeral. But there was a lot more cathartic and symbolism going on in there than just sort of being nasty, I guess. For me, this was really symbolic because by having the funeral itself, I was telling my emotions, okay, now you can let go of this baggage. You don't have to pack it around. It's dead. It's gone. Yeah. It's history.
Buried.
Well, in our case, ashes.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we ended up with a ban on burning. And even though where we were going to have it was solid rock and there was nothing to catch on fire, the whole thing was we were also all involved in outdoors things. And the last thing we needed was somebody being able to spot this fire from miles away. And, no, we didn't need that. So I actually waited until Labor Day weekend when the ban was lifted. And that's when we all got together and did it. And we stuffed the effigy with bull manure, literally bull manure. There was a place called the Bullpen where they raised young bulls. And I sent a bunch of the guys out there with 5-gallon buckets. And we filled them up with dried bull manure. And that's what they stuffed the effigy for. They did all this for me while I was still at work.
Wow.
And, we had some forgotten clothing items that had been his, as well as some items that they'd found in various places that were symbolic of things about him and things that he'd done. Anyhow, we assembled this effigy then. I actually still have photographs. My husband's even seen them. And he laughs, too, because he gets it, because, he just gets it. But anyhow, the whole thing was, and then we lit the effigy on fire, and we burned it. And we had a party all around the effigy as it burned. And at the end of the evening, the guys all went and peed on it and put out the fire. It's funny to laugh about now, and it was fun to laugh then. But, when you talk about cathartic events, for somebody who'd just gone through a difficult end of a relationship, I had a friend who was going through a really nasty divorce, and she had missed the effigy thing because she was immersed in her own issues at the time. And, I was telling her about it, one night when she's like, really upset, and his girlfriends get together and they talk about things when one of them's having a hard time. I said, this is what I did. And it really, really helps. I mean, it may sound silly and stuff, but it does. Because there is that element of, now it's dead, it's gone, and I can let it go. And so we did the same thing for her. We got together, we put together an effigy, and we burned it. And, granted, the things were a little bit different with the way she did it, but, she had different things going on and a different personality than mine. So it was a much smaller group, a much quieter little burning. But, nobody danced around the fire with her. But, that was okay. She wanted to, she just took the skeleton of the concept and made it her own, and that's the way things should be sometimes. But it was a cathartic thing that we did, and I can definitely see your character, sort of wanting to have an effigy and burn it too.
Yeah, she could have done something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how people, do deal with relationships going bad and relationships going good. There's nothing cuter. As Wendy Darling says in Peter Pan, I'm ever so much more than 20. I'm a grandma now, and so are most of my friends. And when one of the single ones calls and you hear that sparkle in her voice, and you're like, what's going on? Because I've got girlfriends, all over the country, since I haven't been one to stay in one place forever. And nor have they. And when you talk to one of them, that maybe you haven't talked to in a month or two, you can hear that in their voice, and there's a difference. And you hear when things start going bad. You don't have to talk about what it is. You just know.
You already know.
And then you eventually know you're going to get that call about little slimy so-and-so, or tears, whichever, because it can be either way. Yeah, it is. It's interesting and traumatic to be lived through it when you're doing it yourself, or when your daughters are. Yeah, there's some things you don't want to live vicariously, and that's one, I think.
Yeah, but I remember a woman telling me, this was like maybe 20 years ago. I was much younger then. She was much older than me, telling me that it doesn't matter really what age you are. When you fall in love, it's like you're 15 all over again.
It is.
And you can be 15 or 25 or 45 or 65. And the feelings, the emotionscapes are the same. So I found that interesting. I mean, I wrote this book. The book was only published a couple of years ago, but it was written 20 years ago. And lately, just recently, I've been working with an editor and rereading, going through the whole manuscript. And I look back at, some of the experiences and the responses of the protagonist, thinking, well, she was young. I have to forgive her. I really have to forgive her for some of her responses. But at the same time, I'm thinking, this is a universal story, because her experience at all the many levels, emotional, psychological, spiritual, happen to every woman at any period of her life.
I mean, and you really, there is no escaping it. You're going to do it sooner or later. Some people.
I think if people are lucky, I think if they're lucky to experience falling in love. I mean, some people don't ever really truly fall in love in their lives, and I find that incredibly sad.
Kind of, it is, but sometimes when, and this is going to be something that maybe says something not so nice about myself even, but I've told several friends of this. When my first marriage ended and we went our separate ways and everything, there was that initial spell of, all of a sudden I'm not responsible for anybody else. I don't have to check in with anybody else. I don't have to worry about what they need. All I have to worry about is me. And after a lifetime of being, well, no, actually, I was lost. I really was. I had no idea how to do this because I'd been responsible for somebody else for so long. I really had no idea. So, you're kind of looking around at your life and everything about it, and I realized then that the vacancy in my life, he hadn't left. He had not occupied any space in my life for some time.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you think about that, it's kind of, that was to me was kind of sad that, I was in a marriage and he didn't occupy space in my life.
Mm.
My life was filled up with other things or not filled up with other things. And, in a way that was sadder than having a huge hole in your life. To really realize that I'd just been going through the motions for a while.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't matter. Oh, everybody says, oh, it was his fault, he cheated. Well, yeah, he was the one that opted to end things that way. But, when you think about it, I had my part in it too because of the fact that I had emotionally distanced myself for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
And, I was no longer investing myself in it.
And you were present.
I was just going, like I said, going through the motions. And, you can't do anything if you're only going through the motions. I mean, we've all encountered an employee in a store or restaurant or wherever that's only going through the motions or just there for the paycheck or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's not, they're so irritating. And
it's kind of droning. I mean, you're droning. You're just droning through your life.
Yeah.
You're in effect The Walking Dead. You aren't engaged in your own life.
No. And I remember thinking, because even my best friend would always go on about, oh, you have such a perfect marriage, because I didn't talk about things. I didn't talk about what was wrong or why I was less than thrilled with life. And I'm thinking to myself, nobody really sees. Nobody sees anything that's going on. And
that's kind of true of all. That's kind of true of all relationships, though, because unless you're in the relationship, if you're someone looking in from the outside, you can't really know what the experience really is.
No.
And there's many levels. I mean, you can guess, you can get inklings, but you can't ever really know. That's why so many couples,
and I guess,
you look at people who are alone, who are wishing to fulfill themselves in a relationship, are looking at people who are involved in a relationship and kind of sugarcoat things and believe that what they're seeing on the surface of things is ideal or can become ideal for them, and will put a relationship on a pedestal where it really doesn't belong. I mean, the dynamics of the relationship are only known by the members who are engaged.
I've done it before. Right, I've done it before because I can remember I had some relatives, and I thought they had the perfect marriage, and they weren't a whole lot older than me. And, watching them, I just thought, oh, they have a perfect marriage. And then, a couple years later, I'm finding out the only reason they'd stayed married was they couldn't afford a divorce. Now, eventually, they did work through their problems, and they're still happily married. But the thing is the shock of realizing they'd have gotten a divorce if they could have afforded it.
And that your perceptions were so wrong.
Your perceptions were so wrong.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I guess ultimately, like 20, 30 years later, seeing that, well, they worked through it and they're still married, it must have, what they need. They must have figured it out somehow or another. Maybe that's, hope for all of us. That we'll figure out a way to work things out. And it's, each relationship is so unique. Each year, each issue, each stage of life, everything's continually changing.
Yeah.
And, it's like trying to build a house on shifting sands.
Exactly.
So, yeah, relationships they're interesting. Even friendships. I've got friendships that, I still, maintain and whatnot. But the reality is the friendships are built on the past. They're built on shared experiences that are 30 years ago, or, in many cases. There's not any current events going on that we really share, or even current interests. It's all strictly based on who we were 30 years ago.
And you call it a
few months. Some of them I do, not all of them. Not all the people that I was friends with 30 years ago, but yeah, there's a few that I still stay in touch with. Sometimes it's because a new type of relationship was actually forged with their kids when their kids came looking for answers. A decade or two later, it's like, do you remember me? Well, yeah, but you're about 3 foot tall then. Yeah, and sometimes it is. It's more of a relationship with the kids now, or there's still a few that I do. It's almost a sisterly sort of thing going on. I have to admit, even my own sister, her and I are as alike as oil and water.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get along real well. We get along better now than we ever have. But that's not necessarily saying a whole lot, because there have been a few knockdown between us in the past. And that's, often the case. Women don't always make good friends or good sisters. And yet at the same time, women can be their own best friends.
I don't know. I find relationships fascinating. Really fascinating.
They are. I prefer to watch without having to participate too often, though. A lot of times, and you know this too, you watch a couple, especially a couple that's been together for a long time, and you watch them in action, and you think, how on earth do these two stand each other? They don't have anything in common. They don't think the same. They continually both work at trying to find ways to avoid being around their significant other. Mm-hmm. Maybe they take separate vacations. They can't wait till the other one goes to work or whatever. And you wonder, why?
What's the glue?
You haven't said nice in them about that, your partner, as long as I've known you. And why? Why are you there? Because I honestly don't get it. If I was as miserable as they claim to be, and that's the key, claim to be, I certainly wouldn't have been there. I'm not much for misery. That tortured artist thing. No, I figure that misery accidentally finds me often enough. I don't need to arrange for it to have a long stay, right? So you do. You watch some of these couples and you go, I don't know how they stand each other. I'd have to kill one of them. I don't get it. And sometimes it's both of them. I'd have to kill both of them if I was the other one, But, that's sort of my running joke is, no, I couldn't stand to be around them, that person 24 hours a day. I'd have to kill him. I honestly don't really go around killing people. The only thing I really go around killing is spiders. So you didn't have any spiders in your book, thank goodness.
There were some spiders, tarantulas.
Yeah, well, tarantulas are seriously creepy. My solution to dealing with tarantulas...
And innocuous. I mean, they really, really will not bother you if you don't harm them or threaten them in any way. They're very docile creatures. Oh, no, they're very docile creatures. Snakes, on the other hand.
Well, in Arizona, in August, they go looking for mates, and they will sometimes move in herds of thousands.
You're kidding.
But no.
Okay, well, that I've never seen.
They also like to live in areas where stuff has been buried, usually junky kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we had bought a historical house long, long ago, and back in the 60s, it had been, because it had only fairly recently had, things like running water and electricity installed in it. Back in the 60s, a man had lived in the house who, as the locals say it, wasn't quite right in the head. And every day he'd walk the 8 miles to the dump and back, bringing back sacks of stuff from the dump. Okay, that's a little bit weird. Then he'd build fires in the backyard, and he would burn his stuff, and he'd bury it in the yard. There was all kinds of stuff back there.
Wait a minute. He carried the stuff from the dump to his place for the sole purpose of burning it.
And then, yes. Logic doesn't fly. It's just, he wasn't quite right in the head. I don't know what his issues were. Never saw the guy. Didn't live in the area at the time, et cetera, et cetera. Anyhow, that was just the story I was told. I do know that every time I would dig a flower bed, plant a tree, whatever, I would dig up stuff. I also know that we had lots of tarantulas.
Yeah.
Our neighbors had trouble with them, but we sure did. I happen to be kind of spider phobic. I have a basic method of dealing with spiders. You start off with something toxic. You spray it on them. In a pinch, foaming bathroom cleaner and hairspray will also work if you don't have anything labeled bug spray. Okay, those things work too.
You're describing my relationship with scorpions.
Yeah, well, scorpions they're just an ugly, misshapen spider in my book. Anyhow, after the spider begins to have convulsions from the toxic whatever, then you get a large boar.
Something large and heavy.
Yeah, 8-foot-long tooth-board, favorite of choice.
Yeah.
Now you squash it, preferably smearing it along 3 foot of wall or floor, whichever it is on. All right, now once this deed is done, you don't use that room for months because there's bug guts in there. Unless you come clean it up for you. Then the room can be used. You don't have this purification.
I'm thinking you wouldn't do so well in the jungle.
I was at that for most of my life, and now I live in Mississippi. And in Mississippi, it's hot and humid, and they have lots and lots of spiders. I went on a tour. When I first moved to New Orleans, I went on a tour in the swamp. And one of the first things they showed us was what they called a golden silk spider. And I'm not kidding. This spider had built a web across a 12-foot or so section of the bayou. And I could see the web from 20 feet away. The spider was probably about 10 inches wide as it hung up there in the spider web. And I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking, spider can catch birds. But it can catch birds. And then the guy who's giving us the tour tells us that they can jump. I moved to the other side of the boat.
Oh, no.
There are spiders here. I mean, they're obscene. Anyhow, back to spider killing, okay? When the tarantulas come, and my daughter at the time, and she's also ever so much more than 20 now, but she was a toddler at that point, She comes bebopping out the back door one day, and I look up, and there was a column right there that supported a carport. And on that carport column, there is a tarantula that stretches from corner to corner of the column, which was roughly 10, 12 inches square. I'm sure it's going to get my daughter. All right, so we get the handy-dandy gallon of bug spray. And we proceed to use the whole gallon on the spider, who never showed any signs of convulsions. At this point, I'm out of bug spray, and I still have a spider between me and the door. So I resorted to the water hose. I discovered water hoses are great with tarantulas. You can chase them away from your house and your area. I mean, spiders could colonize the desert to their heart's content. Just don't come around my house. Yeah. Don't come in my house. Don't come in the yard. I don't want to look at you. So after that, I did use the water hose to chase them away. They don't like water. So anyhow, that's the story of me and spiders. No, I don't like spiders. Snakes actually bother me less until I moved to Mississippi. I'm not familiar with the snakes of the South, so I don't know which ones are poisonous and which ones aren't, and I don't know how they behave. Now, rattlesnakes and coral snakes and all that in the desert, I had a basic familiarity with. We kind of had a live and let live attitude. Unless you're under the car or under my steps, you can do your thing. Stay out of my chicken house, stay out of my garden, stay out from under my steps, stay out from under my car. Outside of that, I don't care where you go. And, as many snakes as there were in the desert, when you know how they live and where they live, you don't have accidental encounters. Mm-hmm. In all the years I spent hiking and camping, one time I had a near miss. Actually, it wasn't a rattlesnake. It was a pig-nosed bull snake, which looks like. Anyhow, I was hiking with my son, who at the time was about 7, I guess. And he tended to function in a state of oblivion. And he almost stepped on it. It was early spring, and it was real cold still. There were still patches of snow in the shade and whatnot. He almost stepped on the snake that was trying to warm up in the middle of the trail, which, of course, startled me and made me realize that he was really too oblivious to, for words, and I needed to wake him up a little bit. And anyhow, that was the only time I've ever had an accidental encounter, because usually they hear you coming or you know where they're going to be. Don't stick your arm in dark. Yeah. Don't go down mining shafts. They like mining shafts. I don't like mining shafts. Mining shafts are dark and creepy. I don't. Snakes can have it. Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of the snakes have a startle factor though. When they come slithering out, at least in Arizona, there was a number of snakes that really look similar to a rattlesnake. So you would freeze, waiting to identify whichever part you needed to see to know what kind of snake it was, the head or the tail usually. But here they're all a mystery. I do know the little green snakes, they call them green snakes or tree snakes. They're not poisonous. Outside of that, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know about Mississippi. I know about Belize, though. And the Tommy Goff, they call them Tommy Goff there, or three-step. I guess they're Fer-de-Lance snakes are the most dangerous there. Really scary. Really scary. And I've had a few encounters. And in fact, this winter I was there, and a young girl, really sad story, I guess she was about 12 years old, was bitten and died just up the road from me. Just up the road. So, yeah, pretty dangerous.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate when things with them happen. We never belonged to the only good snake is a dead snake, school of thought, but we always had neighbors who did. So we...
Yeah, I usually don't kill things. I mean, even spiders. Scorpions I have a different relationship with now, after having been bitten a few times and suffered the consequences, but generally I'll leave things alone. But the Tommy Goff, they make me nervous. I look out for them.
Yeah, I would definitely look out for them too. Scorpions, I was stung once. I had one in a hiking boot, and I'd actually hauled the hiking boot to an area where they don't even live. And when I put the boot on, it was apparently in the boot. So it got me through 2 pairs of socks, and I really didn't get anything more than a sore, swollen side of my foot.
Did it paralyze you?
So that wasn't too bad.
No?
I really had no effects other than
really
swelling and pain, and it was gone in a matter of hours. I was scared, though, because we were at a big family powwow up in the mountains. All the other adults had left camp, so the only ones at camp with me when I had this happen was like a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old or something. And I was probably in my early 20s, I guess, or about 20. And so it was a case of, if I'm going to die, I really don't want to die here with just these 2 kids. So far to town. So after I killed the scorpion, I put my boots on and loaded the 2 kids up in the Jeep, and we drove up to meet everybody else. And nothing happened. Now, my grandmother had always been immune to their stings, but one of my uncles had gone into a coma. Mm-hmm. So we kind of knew it can go either way. But if you're not feeling anything by now, you're probably not going to. So in my case, it was a real superficial sting. I had fairly calloused feet. I had 2 pairs of socks on, and, I don't think I got much venom, to be honest. Mm. So I was just lucky.
Yeah, lucky. I was paralyzed for 8 hours.
Oh, that's got to be terrible.
Yeah, it was horrific. I really thought I was going to die. I didn't, but I really believed I was going to die. Completely and utterly paralyzed in a hammock. Couldn't get up even to get a glass of water. I mean, could not move.
Yeah, that's got to be a nightmare.
The next time I got stung, I realized the trick, because I was with a local, and when I was stung and freaking out and screaming and thinking that, my death was looming, he gave me baking soda to rub into the sting, and nothing happened. Absolutely nothing. So for a year after that, I had a little vial of baking soda that I wore around my neck and carried with me everywhere, just in case. But now I know the trick. It worked.
Yeah, baking soda was always our first line of defense. Sometimes now we will, spiders, I happen to be allergic to spider bites as well as a couple of other insect bites. And sometimes we actually mix Benadryl and baking soda together and use that, and with a little water to make a paste. And we can put that on the spider bite. And that helps. And my daughter is also fond of adding tea tree oil to the mixture, too, as a way of combating the effects. As a teenager, I was bit by a recluse spider on my leg twice. And having gone through that with the necrotic tissue and the whole bit, I had huge, nasty holes in my leg when that was over. And it took probably over a decade for my leg to lose the pit where the center of the bite had been.
Wow.
So, yeah, there are serious things even in the United States to avoid. I never saw the spider. The only way I know it was a recluse bite is that's what the doctor said.
Yeah.
Because it was in the middle of the winter. I lived in Iowa, northern Iowa at the time. It's not like we have a whole lot of spiders in the snow,
Yeah, well, we're safe up here in Canada. We don't have too many of those nasties. But I spend a lot of time in the jungle, but I've been really lucky, considering where I've traveled and how I've traveled and where I've hiked, where I've lived.
Yeah, and the whole hiking and jungle thing, I've never been in a jungle, and so listening to your description in the book or reading it, I think.
Did you enjoy that?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I still do go camping and whatnot. I tend to avoid summertime camping, which probably is much closer to actual jungle camping than it is to anything else. But here in the South, it's just, in the summertime, it's just too hot. I don't do well with heat anymore, and humidity has never been my friend. I guess it was all the years of living on the desert. I can remember when I first moved to New Orleans, asking a friend who was a local, do people's hair here, does it mildew? I swore my before I get drunk again. Pouring sweat.
Everything mildews in the tropics. I mean, absolutely everything.
I was pretty sure that any minute now I'm going to have moss growing in my hair.
Yeah.
It just never seemed to dry. And granted I have long hair, but it's really not that thick. I mean, come on. My hair should dry sooner or later, right? No. And people would look at me because I moved to New Orleans, of course, in July, end of July. Perfect month to move to New Orleans, right? Not. So I'm coming from the desert. I'm thinking I shouldn't have any trouble with the heat. I worked outside, in the blazing sun, even well over 100 degrees. I shouldn't have any trouble adjusting to the heat. Wrong. My body's like, okay, you're hot. We'll sweat. You're still hot. We'll sweat more. You're still hot. We're going in overdrive. So the sweat's pouring off of me, even when I walk in air conditioning. People are looking at me like, I'm using some sort of strange drug, but this woman is really pouring sweat, and she just never stops. It's like, no, I never stop. I was miserable probably the first month until I started to acclimate, because it was literally like my body thought, you're hot, we'll sweat more, and you're not cooling off, so we'll sweat even more. Yeah, it was not fun for me, I guess.
But you do
eat cool in the desert. Pardon?
Yeah, I prefer the desert as well. But I find myself in the tropics because I love the vegetation. I mean, I just absolutely adore it. But I do prefer my body prefers the desert. It prefers the dry climate. So,
the cooling at night is such a relief. I mean, the sun goes down and the temperature starts to drop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
That's really, really nice. Here, the sun goes down and there's really not much change in temperature until morning, and very slight. Very, very slight. There's not a whole lot of difference. And it just stays warm. I mean, really warm. I'm now trying to learn to garden in this climate. I always had a green thumb until I moved to where it's warm and everything's green already. Now I can grow. I have some tomatoes I planted, end of March, I guess it was. They're about 3 inches tall. They were taller than that.
Why?
Pardon?
Why? What's happened?
I have no idea what I'm doing. I mean, tomatoes are so pepper plants. I had pepper plants always, 3-4 feet tall. Yeah. Some of them live years. Well, not here. The pepper plants I planted at the end of March are still about 4 inches tall. Wow. I have no idea what's going on. The petunias. Petunias are like no fail. Any idiot can grow a petunia. Not me. I got petunias planted, and they're still alive and blooming somehow with all 3 of their leaves.
That's really funny. I don't know, maybe your environment in Mississippi is just too toxic, because I have no trouble growing in the tropics. I mean, it's hard to get things not to grow.
Well, I'm still trying to kill things in the yard. I'm running a war on a couple of holly bushes. The holly bushes don't like me, and they like to jump out and grab me.
Yeah.
I waged a war last fall.
How's your soil?
Pardon?
How was your soil? Is your soil good?
Well, here, the pecan trees and live oaks seem to love it. I planted some kiwi vines. They love it. But they're the only things on my blueberries love it. Outside of that, no. The stuff that was already here, the blueberry bushes that I planted and the kiwis that I planted, they're doing great.
Blueberries, Mississippi? Isn't it too warm?
For what? Blueberries?
Blueberries.
Southern blueberries.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the southern variety. They have huge blueberry farms in Mississippi.
Oh.
and Louisiana. So,
and
yeah, pardon?
Same kind of blueberries that we have. Like, they're not like another kind of fruit, just called blueberries. They're real blueberries.
No, they're real blueberries. They call them rabbit eye blueberries or southern blueberries.
Interesting.
A blueberry.
Maybe they grow in Central America.
I think they need some winter chill because where they grow blueberries, they don't seem to grow citrus very well.
Oh, okay.
So they don't need a lot, but they need some. Yeah. So I don't know.
Well, they wouldn't get any there, so.
Yeah. People do grow figs and some subtropical fruits here, as well as all the way to the coast, because we're about 100 miles inland. And on the coast, they grow more subtropicals than they do this far inland, because it does get a little bit colder. People don't realize too that maybe in the tropics there's not that much difference, but there's all these microclimates when you get into a state like Arizona or Mississippi, either one. Just a difference of a little bit of rain or slightly cooler in the winter or slightly cooler in the summer can make a huge difference in what grows and what doesn't grow.
Yeah.
Maybe I was more sensitive to that because when I did live in the desert, it was as though the plants talked to me. And I don't mean, we sat down and had conversations, but they told you things. They told you, like, had the soil been recently disturbed, how high you were, how much rain usually fell in the area, what sorts of animals were going to live in the area, and all that kind of thing, how the soil was, et cetera. And it varied a great deal because Arizona was all about altitude. The higher you were, the cooler it was. Probably the more rain you got. And the lower you were, the warmer it was. So there was a lot of variation in climate there. It's not quite as quick to be to an entirely different climate in Mississippi because you can't go from mountain alpine to nearly tropical sort of environment, in 2 hours of driving here. In fact, we're a little short on mountains in Mississippi.
I remember that.
Yeah, I used to think it was flat. I'll confess something else here, too. Last winter, I was really, really disliking living in Mississippi after a series of events. It boiled down to encounters of people of the less friendly kind. And I was kind of down on the fact that we'd chosen to stay in Mississippi. And this spring, I've been out on a few little short jaunts and whatnot. But getting away from the towns and the highways onto little dinky roads and smaller, almost forgotten communities and whatnot, it was as though I began to discover the state and actually kind of fell in love with it. It's a really incredibly beautiful place if you take the time to actually look at it.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the thing, is you do have to get away from the bigger towns and cities and get out to the places that have almost dried up and blown away. A lot of these towns, they don't even have a store anymore, no gas station or store. Some of them may not even have a post office. And it's just a cluster of houses and a couple of churches usually. And they can be really interesting places to drive through and see what there is to see. And we see some surprising things so far. We even encountered a guy who was plowing his field with a mule.
Oh,
now,
nice.
That's not something you run into. You don't run into that very often, but yeah, we've seen all sorts of funny, hilarious things, right down to the colors people have chosen to paint their houses. Some people must be colorblind when they go to the paint store, at least.
Or maybe they're buying.
So all of you decorators out there, please do not choose dark green and purple to paint your house. Okay, it might look great for Mardi Gras colors. It loses its effect on your house. It just is not the same. Yeah. So, yeah, we have seen some interesting paint jobs. and interesting things that people do. Funny signs that people will put up, I think the one I took a picture of last week, the sign that says "Empty Farms." And I thought, oh God,
Empty farms.
Empty farms. Empty farms, and you see funny things that people do when you're driving around on these back roads, and remnants of days gone by, falling down log cabins, ancient barns and sheds, and old style tools and implements, and all sorts of things. And sometimes going out in your own backyard can show you different things, I think. So yeah, I've had fun with that this year, and it's kind of nice to like where you're living.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's much better than disliking it and being down on it and negative and so forth and so on. Yeah. So with you shifting around, are there particular places that you really, really have liked and maybe never lived there, but a short time? I know that you also did live a short time in Mississippi, not far from where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
But how about other places?
I've traveled all of my life. So I've lived in, many different places in Europe, lived in the U.S. for a while, all over Canada, Central America, and I do believe I prefer the tropics. And I do believe I prefer the tropics in the mountains. And when I was younger, of course, I loved the sea and being by the ocean, et cetera, but now I'm preferring the mountains and preferring to be isolated from, in more remote areas, away from people. So I think I'm becoming increasingly misanthropic, too, as I get older.
Well, I know that people...
You started to say something?
Well, I started to, people used to make comments because I spent a lot of time camping alone, in the mountains and canyons and whatnot. And I would always get comments from friends about, how, the boogeyman was going to get me. And I said, you know what? I am far safer out there waiting for the boogeyman to show up there than I am walking down a street in the average city.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As scared of the bears as I am the nut, that wants to take what I've got or thinks I've got something they want.
Well, I just,
so, I can understand why.
You get that. I mean, I really, I never get bored. I enjoy my solitude. I guess I'm a bit of a recluse. I have to admit, I'm a bit of a recluse.
Well,
that doesn't mean that I don't enjoy people, but I'm very selective, let's say.
I know I twisted your arm a little bit to convince you that coming on the show and talking about writing your book and whatnot.
Yeah.
You weren't the easy sell I had with everybody.
No,
okay?
No. I know. But you know what? That's why I write. I mean, writing is kind of an extension of myself. So it's a way of moving out into the world and, sharing my experience through the written word.
And it's the same thing, like, people's, to be honest, I'm more than a little reclusive. I do live in the town. More than a little reclusive, and yet, and I tell people I'm very shy. And I am
too, very shy.
People say, you can't be, you do a radio show. I'm like, oh yeah, you can. The thing is, with a radio show, you're and like a book, you're choosing what you're going to put out there for people to see. And outside of that, you kind of you can limit things. How far do you want to go with it? Some people say, oh, you must want to be the next Art Bell or Shock Jock or whatever. I'm like, no, actually not. And I've never been close to any of those people. I can't see me as a shock jock simply because I'm way too polite. And besides that, if it was somebody that I thought was really a dork or wrong, why would I want to bring them on the show with me? So, yeah, I tend to not be confrontational. I wouldn't do well in a job where being confrontational was the best way to do it. Yeah, so I can understand being a recluse and whatnot. But guess what? It is time for us to take a break. So before we go, you want to tell everybody how to find your website again?
Yes, it is at johnasleep.com. www is the preface. JAHNASLEEP.com. johnasleep.com.
Okay. And folks, while we're away from your computer, don't go anywhere because we'll be right back with more talk with Christine McIntyre.
Visit paltalk.com. Go to the social issues, select other, and enter the UFO Paranormal Radio Network.
Light up your night with The Kevin Smith Show. Hi, this is Kevin Smith. Join me Monday through Friday right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Hello, this is Angela Thomas with a message about living life to the fullest. As a psychic clairvoyant, I often give insights to one's career path, financial situation, or relationship. Whether one is happy or not in their current situation, where he or she is right now is an important part of learning valuable lessons that can lead to fulfilling one's life purpose. If I can offer you insights, feel free to contact me at 636-278-2272, again 636-278-2272, or visit my website, angelathomas.org. I'm considered a psychic, so I provide accurate and detailed psychic readings for individuals as well as groups. Remember, no matter what influences your life at the moment, live life to the fullest. Stay in gratitude, count your blessings, and prepare yourself for more opportunities around the corner. I'm Psychic Angela Thomas, and my website is angelathomas.org.
Hey everybody, this is Erica Getch, and I want to keep you connected every Friday night at 8 p.m. Pacific on the Galactic Connection. As always, I'll be taking your calls in the second hour, and as always, TGC is glad to be a part of the UFO Paranormal Radio Network. So please check out tgcradio.com. Hope to see you there.
Whoa! Did you hear?
Listen to the Church of Mavis radio show, hosted by Jeffrey Pritchett, 11 p.m. Eastern, Saturday nights. Follow your weird and journey into the high strange. Be sure to stop by churchofmavisradio.com for upcoming shows, paranormal news, and show archives. That's churchofmavisradio.com.
Hey! Hi there. Got your attention? I'm Gia Scott, and I was curious what you were doing from 7 to 9 p.m. Central Time on Tuesdays. See, I host this really interesting little radio program that airs live then, and we bring in all sorts of guests. Authors, experiencers, and everything in between. It's paranormal and guaranteed to make you go, My guest list is always up at www.giascott.com, and do tune in to the Dawn of Shades from 7 to 9 p.m. on Tuesdays.
Tune in to the Mind Cemetery with your hosts Chip and Nicole every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network. We delve into UFOs, abductions, ghosts, aliens, conspiracies, and cryptozoology.
And how could you ever forget about those creepy topics you won't hear on your local news?
This is where I would insert my obligatory skeptical statement. The Mind Cemetery, where the paranoia about the paranormal comes to rest.
Follow us on Twitter and subscribe to us on Facebook. Also check us out on our website, mindcemetery.com, for show updates and the critically acclaimed Mind Cemetery blog.
It's not critically acclaimed, but you should check it out anyway. MindCemetery.com.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Benetti, and along with Joe Montaldo, we host News on the Flip Side. Come join us every Saturday night at 7 p.m. Central for our 3-hour program. We have opinions on everything, and we're not afraid to share them. False history gets made all day, every day. The truth of the new is never on the news, but you can find it here with News on the Flip Side. Remember, don't be politically correct. Just be correct. Join us.
Tune in to UFO Undercover, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, with your host, Joe Montaldo, right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Welcome back to the Dawn of Shades. I'm your host, Gia Scott, and tonight we are talking with Christine McIntyre. Now, don't forget, you can send in your questions to my email, giascott@exogenynetwork.com. And before we get started, Christine, you want to remind everybody the title of your book and where they can get it?
It's Jana Sleep, JAHNASLEEP.com is the website. Title of the book is John Asleep. And I'd like to say that people can dip their feet because the first 3 chapters are published on the website. So they can get a feel for where the book is going.
And for people who are curious what I thought about it, I did post a review on both Amazon and Goodreads.com, which is where I've reviewed all the authors that we have had on this series, and in the future all the books that I review will be posted there. So if you want to see what I've been reading, you can find out there, actually, because the reviews get posted fairly quickly. I'm trying to be diligent and even get caught up on some of the ones that I'm behind on. And while we were talking on break, we were talking a little bit about the book, John Asleep. And a lot of people may have the impression that this was a easy to categorize romance, and it's really not. You want to tell them a little bit more about the story, Christine?
I'm not quite sure what I can say about this story without telling the story, which would mean basically telling the story of the whole book.
Right, right. Well, in a nutshell, I guess part of it is the fact that it is more than a story about romantic entanglement. It's also a story about spiritual growth.
Yes, self-discovery.
And taking a slightly different route to that self-discovery than
it's a story about
is often taken.
Really, it's a story about one woman's spiritual awakening in the context of a love story, let's say. And one of my intentions writing the story, and I think what makes it different from other novels like you so generously said in your review, and I considered that a compliment. What makes it different is that I treat my exploration of the subject from a multidimensional perspective. So it was my intention to examine this particular love story or love entanglement from the many different levels that we experience life and our life stories. And you know, I wanted to examine not only what was happening in the plot, you know, as the story developed, but also what was going on inside of the protagonist at the psycho-spiritual level and in particular the emotional level. And I find that, you know, in many novels that I read, I'm always wanting to know more about what's really going on inside the heads and hearts of the protagonists. And I'm
yeah, because that adds a depth to a story, and when you don't know what they're thinking or why they do these things, it's much easier to be annoyed with them than it is. You know, you don't get what they're. You don't get what the. It's
you don't
all
understand
about,
what their motives
I guess
are.
is what I'm saying, because you're trying to guess. It's like right. It's like standing on the outside looking in at anyone. You don't know the whole story. You're only seeing a little piece of that story. So often you're misinterpreting it and kind of clueless.
Yeah. This is kind of, so writing this story, I was really trying to write it from the inside out. You know, as opposed to letting, I mean, the story could have spoken for itself through the action, but I think the introspective, sort of self-reflective elements, you know, just through the telling of the story, like you said, adds depth, gives it more dimension, more life, is more true to life. And I mean, readers, you know, my readers so far have been telling me that that's exactly what they really enjoyed about this book.
Right. Well, it wasn't reading the same old thing. And like I told you on break, out of all the book reviews I've written, and I've written a lot over the years, that was probably the most difficult one. I had to really think, how am I going to say what I'm thinking without writing, you know, another book about how I felt.
and feeling.
Yeah, you know. And, you know, it wasn't one of those books. I've read a few and reviewed a few that you felt like you were in 10th grade and had a reading assignment. You know, it certainly is not anything like that. This was an enjoyable book to read. I read it rather quickly because it was enjoyable. But it is not your usual cut and dried that goes in this pigeonhole. It's strictly a romance, and that's all it is. It's not strictly a self-help, or it's not strictly a biography type story. It's its own story, and it stands sort of overlapping many different things. And it's a really enjoyable read. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit deeper than your average book, I highly recommend it. Now, if you want to just shallowly skirt along the surface of life, you probably won't enjoy it. Yeah, and really living in life is all about doing more than just hitting the highlights, okay? And this character in this book really is more about the other parts of life than just hitting the highlights. And that's a good thing, I think. So, do you have another book in the works?
Yes, I do.
Any idea when you?
Yes, I do. I'm hard to say when it's going to be ready, but I'm still at the research stage, so I'm still, you know, there's a process of incubation that goes on with me, and like I said, with this book, John F. Sleep literally incubated for about a year. And when I actually sat down to write it, it just poured out of me. I mean, it was like a birthing process. And so I don't know if other writers write the same way as I do, but books get written inside of me, And so what I call the incubation period, they're sort of being written inside at the emotional and intellectual level, and they start to take form, and, you know, and I start with something very small that, you know, develops into kind of a skeleton and then slowly over time gets fleshed out, so that when I actually sit down and start the technical aspect of it, which is actually getting the words out on paper, everything is already there. Right. So it's really like birthing. It really is like birthing. And then I've got a new baby. And then, you know, like any time, especially with your first child, you know, you've got this new baby, and then you're wondering, well, what do I do with it now?
Yeah.
So,
well, you know, for you, when you released John Asleep, was there this huge emotional turmoil that you went through?
No.
You know, it was just it was ready. It was ready to go.
It was ready to go. It was there. It was ready to go. And you know, things had changed considerably. Like, you know, especially indie publishing has come online in the last few years. Remember, I've spent the better part of the last 20 years of my life in the jungle, and mostly off the grid. So I wasn't, you know, plugged in. I wasn't Facebooking. I wasn't, you know, engaged in social media. I barely emailed, you know, whenever I went into town, which, you know, wasn't even that often. I'd take care of some correspondence. So I was really, you know, isolated. Like I said, I'm a recluse. I like it out in the jungle. So bringing this book forward into the public was a whole lot easier when I came out of the jungle and realized, oh, you know, writers can publish themselves. Yay. So I figured out that process, and I did it. The manuscript was there. It had been there for a long, long time, you know, sitting on my hard drive. And so I just, you know, I learned the technical part of it and put it out there. And there it is. And the response has
it's nice
amazing.
to know that not everybody goes through.
And
it should be. It was a really good book. It was a really good book. I really enjoyed it. All of you that are thinking about reading it, go read the sample chapters that she's got up on her website, because it is definitely worth paying attention to. It was a very, very interesting book. And, you know, I'll admit that for me there was this, you know, huge emotional turmoil. I was sending this child, you know, called a book, out into the world with no protection. Okay, what if it wasn't ready? I wanted to put a condom over it, okay? Now, I have since recovered, but it is sat for 2 years. From the time I had the first person review it after I finished it until it was actually published was 2 years, maybe a little more, but about 2 years. And so, you know, there was a bit of emotional distancing between finishing it and then sending it out without a condom. But, yeah, for me there was that emotional trauma potential, because I felt as though maybe I had invested too much of my own self into the process itself, if that makes any sense. I shouldn't have gotten so attached to it, maybe.
Yeah, I think maybe what made it easy for me was, you know, I was emotionally detached from the story because it had been written so long ago. You know, I mean, obviously, you know, this kind of story, I mean, you know, writers write from their own experience. So a lot of the sort of inside out that I'm talking about, you know, is a lot of my own experience that went into the telling of that particular story. So you know, that kind of transparency is a little nerve-wracking at one point, But then when I realized that, no, this is every woman's story. This is everybody's story. You know, it isn't just my story or, you know, the composite, the Tashi, who was sort of the composite of my female friends and myself thrown into the mix. It was I felt when I published it, just telling this story and then publishing, I felt that, you know, in general, most people will relate to it. Because I think, you know, we're at a stage in history where there's been a huge movement, you know, a huge sort of spiritual movement in the last 20 and 30 years. And so this story has become the story of many people searching for themselves, searching to connect with themselves at a spiritual level. And like you said, you know, if you're just interested in reading the highlights, and I suppose there are lots of people who live their lives like that, but personally, I can't imagine doing that myself. And luckily, the people in my life and my own friends are very much like me, live their lives multidimensionally. They aren't skimming over the surface of their lives. So I had a lot of confidence because they were my initial readers. Mm-hmm. So the response I got was very, very positive. So when I published it, I already knew that I had readers that appreciated the material.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is nice to know that not everybody goes through that. That at least I was being neurotic and individual in my.
Hey, that doesn't mean that I won't be nervous about the next one.
Well, in my case, you know, people said, "Oh, you indie published it because you got rejected by publishing houses." Is
no, that's not. That isn't
submitted. So how could I get rejected?
Exactly.
In my case, it was like the best thing I can equate is standing on the diving board and looking at the water and saying, "Okay, I'm never going to get wet unless I just jump in." So hold my breath, close my eyes, and jump, and hope that I don't freeze to death or hit the bottom or you know, whatever. Yeah, all the what ifs.
No, I just have to say, I have been like intensely busy lately, like really, really busy, and I started to read your book when we first discussed doing this show. Like, I don't know, it must be a month ago now,
or more. It's been a while.
It's been a while. It's been at least a month, and I have just been so intensely busy. I haven't had time to really read anything else. You know, I'm like focused on my work in hand. But I did start to. I think I got a few chapters into your book, and I was thinking I'm going to really enjoy this, and I certainly enjoyed the first chapters that I read. So I'm anxious to get back to it.
Well, hopefully you will. And
I will. No, I definitely will. Just a question of time. Just a question of time.
I understand the busy thing very well. You know, I have had periods of time, you know, in the last 6 months where I was busy some days. No, you couldn't get anything done, you know, and it's hard. We all have real lives, too. Like right now, I don't know if anybody's heard her, but my 2-year-old granddaughter's visiting. And she's been out here admiring Christine's picture on my screen. Oh. She thinks you're quite beautiful. She's waved hi many times. And, you know, and we all have things going on, you know, and most of this week is going to be focused on spending time with a 2-year-old, which, you know, you want to live in the here and now, spend time with a toddler. There's no tomorrow, there's no yesterday, there's no an hour from now. It's right now.
Right now, yes.
Right now, that's all that exists. Later is non-existent. Later is the equivalent of no, you know. Yeah. So, Yeah, we've had a high old time already. She took her first train ride so she could come visit Grandma. And she happens to be in the stage where she absolutely and totally adores trains. She's nuts about trains. I've never seen a little girl nuts about trains before, but hey, whatever floats your boat, right? So we're going to go spend some more time watching trains. For the things on our agenda. We're going to go watch
train spotting. Train spotting it, too.
Yes. Well, at least hopefully she's not counting.
Hey, you could write a book about that.
Yeah, yes. There we were, watching the train. It had 4 passenger cars. Yeah, she's really, really enthralled with the trains, and she's she's pretty cool. But it does mean for, a busy week for me. Will I get a lot of writing done on my own? No. It's not just going to it's just not going to happen this week. That's okay. I don't need to do it continuously, or maybe I always refer to them as the Ladies of Fate because I have this wild imagination. The Ladies of Fate are these jury box a la Ironsides, or imagine oak, lots of high polish going on there, and the Ladies of Fate sit in this jury box, and they look like the Purple Hat, or is it the Red Hat Society ladies. I had to get the right hat color. The Red Hat Society, the way they're photographed with their red hats, or the purple hats, red hats, purple hat bands. But they're sort of on crack, bright red lipstick, loud makeup, gaudy jewelry, All these old ladies, all right, they're up there cackling like hens, and they look down from the clouds at me and say, ha-ha, she's not done this week. Let's see what she does with this. So they'll throw me something unexpectedly. And sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's really not so good. But that's okay. They're highly entertained by my antics as I try to cope with whatever they send my way. So, yeah, I have imaginary people in the sky. A little green sir sits on my shoulder. He talks too. Hey, I'm not neurotic, right? I have all these imaginary characters.
Well, they're just your friends that have been around forever.
They have been.
I'm
Actually,
sure.
The running joke is the guy on my shoulder is called Fear, and he whispers in my ear all the time. The day you start to really worry is when Fear is no longer there and he's jumped ship.
Oh.
Then you're up a creek, without that proverbial power. Yeah, Fear, he sits there, and if you let Fear take control, then things don't go very well.
Yeah, nothing happens.
Right. But at the same time,
you're just like stalled.
You're going to be up that creek because Fear is also like this early warning system. So you listen, but you always take it with a grain of salt too.
Exactly.
Yeah, I have my imaginary creature called Fear. I have Ladies of Fate up in their jury box in the sky. Yeah, I'm never lonely or bored. Okay. Always have a conversation. Yeah. So the thing is, maybe that's why I do also enjoy books that have wacky characters in them. What kind of books do you read, Christine?
Oh my God, I read all kinds of books. Let's see.
So you're looking for something to just chill out with, not something to educate and enlighten, cause spiritual growth or anything, just sheer entertainment. What would you go pick up?
Sheer entertainment. Well, the book that arrived today is The English Patient. That I would consider entertainment.
Okay.
Just because I love the movie and never read the book. Remember The English Patient?
The book or seen the movie, so I have no idea. But,
you haven't seen the movie? Oh, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. So I imagine that the book itself will be brilliant, I'm hoping.
Okay, that sounds good.
It's won an award or two. They made a great film out of it. So, yeah. I find lately that I've really been enjoying foreign authors. And there seem to be a lot more of them than there were 30 years ago when I was reading more novels, because I kind of put novels aside for a couple of decades and was educating myself.
Well, I can relate to that too. When I started this series, it was also simultaneously realizing that I probably read less than a handful of novels a year. And
yeah, it happens, doesn't it?
Yeah, you especially when I was, most of my guests were nonfiction authors. 90% or more of the books I read were nonfiction.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great when you're wanting to educate yourself on a topic. That's, of course, where you're going to turn. You're not going to turn to a novel. However, novels sometimes educate us sideways, if that makes any sense.
Exactly. No, absolutely. I was about to say the same thing.
So, reading novels, there's an element of entertainment, and the education part is usually snuck in on us, when we're not expecting it. Mm-hmm. Sort of like, when we're kids and we're told these fables and parables. There's a lesson in those things, too. We don't realize it as we listen to the story. But the same thing is true even as adults with fiction, because there is a message of some kind in almost every novel.
In every story.
Even formula romances, there's a lesson, believe in love. And that's true. So, there's a lesson of some kind. There's some sort of information. You can at least see the world through somebody else's eyes, and maybe in a different locale than where you live.
Well, I find that I'm quite enjoying reading novels again. I mean, I don't know if this is like kind of standard, but when I was young, really started reading seriously, I started with mystery novels and was deeply, deeply into Agatha Christie. Don't ask me how that happened, but it happened, around 9 or 10.
Uh-huh.
And then throughout my teens, I was all about science fiction. Any science fiction that I could get my hands on, I read. And then I moved from science fiction to the classics and read the classics until I got to university. And then it was, I did my degree in history. So then I was, history, political science, history, philosophy, history for years.
Uh-huh.
And then where did I go from there? And then I got on the kind of spiritual philosophy bandwagon, New Age, cosmology, I don't know, anything that I could get my hands on that had to do with anthropology, philosophy, history, self-discovery, new cosmologies, all that stuff, but basically nonfiction. And then I put all of that aside, and in these last few years, I've been reading a lot of nonfiction, but I've also been interspersing that with novels. And like I said, I'm really enjoying foreign authors.
I have been reading a variety of books and genres. For one thing, some of the authors that we've had on during the series have been young adult or new adult authors. And I'll admit, genre that I typically would choose to read a book in.
Mm-hmm. Me neither.
And yet when you think about it, Harry Potter, which has been wildly popular, is a book written for kids. And yet it's got a huge adult following.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of tend to dismiss books written for the young as kind of irrelevant. I've recently picked up reading books for very young children, which I hadn't read in a very long time. I can still remember some of the favorite ones from my daughter, like Marvin K. Mooney, Will You Please Go Home, and Hand, Fingers, Thumb. I could still, 30 years later, quote lines out of those books. But now with a granddaughter, I'm reading new material by new authors with new illustrators and new ways of doing things, and looking at e-books for children for the first time as well. So, I've read a lot of genres that had been long forgotten, by me at least, and discovered that maybe there's more there than what I really had thought about before, too. Am I suddenly going to become an avid reader of books for children? Probably not, okay? There's a limit.
Well, I don't know. It depends on how many grandchildren you get.
Yeah, obviously as she learns and whatnot, I will be more reading, books that, that I think that she might find interesting. I already have some books that I've gotten for her that she's not ready for yet, and that's fine. Reading's a big deal in my family. Always has been. Yeah, and so that's, that's an important part of our life. Now, what do you think about the new e-book thing?
In what way?
Well, as a reader and as a writer, I mean, what do you think about e-books in general?
I'm liking them, and I'm liking them for one reason in particular, and that is we're not killing trees. Although I must admit that I do love holding a book in my hand, and it's really hard to make that sacrifice, but for the sake of our planet, I would encourage everyone to get a Kindle or a Nook or whatever.
Right.
Or read books on
I
your
read
computer.
my first e-book maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And it was actually, I think, the first fiction author I'd ever had on the show. She'd written a paranormal romance. And that was, the first e-book that I had read. And I wasn't too sure about it, and so I kind of had set it aside for a while. But then I got injured, and now I have an arm that doesn't work quite right. Excuse me. So as a result of that, holding a book became difficult. My arm gets tired. And so I've switched to reading e-books, and I prefer them now.
Yeah,
There's no longer the issue of physically holding a book, because in order to read a paper, traditional book, I've got to sit at a desk or table anyhow. So I lost that thing that I used to really like, which was curling up in a chair or on the bed with a book and spending the afternoon. Yeah. Now that's a very complicated process involving propping with pillows, and it's just not enjoyable, okay? It's too much work, and then you add in aging eyes and glasses and trying to get your head just right, and no. I just don't enjoy it.
Another thing for me is I travel a lot. And so, and I move from country to country. I mean, when I say I travel, I just don't take 2-week vacation. I uproot myself and go plunk myself down somewhere else for a period of time. So, carrying my library with me, has become increasingly problematic. And I found, especially in the last 20 years or so, I've had to, over the span of my life, I've probably had to let go of maybe 6 libraries. 6 collections.
Uh-huh.
And it's becoming more and more painful as I get older to let these go.
A lot of times, these books, especially if it's a nonfiction book, you may want to refer back to it for whatever reason.
Exactly, like all my, especially now too that I'm taking my writing seriously. Are we still on?
Yes, we are.
Oh, because I hear something in the background.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm finding that as I'm taking my writing more seriously, I want to refer back to my library, but those libraries are gone. And because I'm still moving around, I'm thinking, okay, well, if I can keep 1,000 books on a Kindle, that's the way to go. And I can just take my reference library with me. So easy, light.
We've just bought this house last summer and moved in, and we'd had stuff in storage for 2 years. And part of it was books in storage. Well, they smell really funky when you get them out of storage. Okay, so you've got that issue too. But the whole 2 years that they were in storage, I couldn't refer to them because
they're all packed up.
a week to go through the storage unit, find the box of books that I was looking for that had the particular book I was looking for.
Exactly.
And there were multiple boxes of books, which anybody who's moved knows book boxes are incredibly heavy. And bookshelf space was becoming an issue. We have all these books coming in from authors on all different topics because my husband also does a radio show. And so we've got all this material coming in, and it becomes overwhelming.
Yeah,
and so I actually told the authors and I discovered that I read much faster and easier when it's in e-format because it's on my computer screen. I don't have anything to hold because I actually have not made up my mind which e-reader to use, so it's on my laptop. And it's real convenient for me, and I can have a lot of books on my laptop, and it goes wherever I want it to go. I don't have to pack a box of books or a book bag with me. Exactly. So anyhow, there you've got it, and it was much quicker to get these books to read. So I had all of them send them to me in one e-format or another. In Kindle, some was in PDF, some was in some other format. But I get the books and I can read them, and it's much quicker and more convenient. And a lot of people have pointed out, transportable. A lot of people pointed out that lack of quality in ebooks. Well, I'm sure when printed books were first available to the masses, there were some less than stellar printed books too. Yeah. I think as the format reaches a wider acceptance and whatnot, we're going to see a resulting improvement. And it's usually technical errors or editing errors. It's not necessarily that the material is just awful. Even printed books had things that some people just absolutely couldn't stand. I know I've read some printed books. I thought, why did anybody bother? But that was my personal opinion. Did everybody agree with me? Obviously not. Some a publishing company printed it. They must have thought somebody wanted to read it. It just wasn't me. But in ebooks it is. I think it's allowed niche material that maybe would not have an audience otherwise to exist. So I really do like the whole indie publishing and ebook and whatnot, because I think it's making not only fiction more widely available, but nonfiction as well, simply because it's easier to get things published that way.
Well,
as well as it's really good for the environment.
Yeah,
I mean, some of us have some really kind of odd interests, and we may want to read pieces that have been written by someone who was an expert in that field. And before, some of these more obscure interests were never going to get published.
True. A lot of I have read actually good books that I picked up at Goodreads that I went to find, at Amazon or Smashwords or wherever I could download a Kindle version. And some of these books are absolutely brilliant. I mean, brilliant writing, brilliant stories. And books that you wouldn't necessarily see in a bookstore or wouldn't be promoted through, traditional publishers. So that I appreciate, and I appreciate the variety. I mean, there's just so much available now.
When I think about when I was younger and I would go to buy a book to read, usually the only people who could influence what I chose to read and offer their opinion on what I was going to like were people that I knew.
Yeah.
Now I can go to Amazon or Goodreads and I can read what other people that I don't know, who know nothing about me and care even less, what they have said about that book, and I can make a judgment call on whether or not I want to spend my money on that book from the reviews. And this explosion of reviews by readers, I think, benefits the authors a great deal as well as the other readers.
Yeah, I think so too. I like that. That's why I appreciated your review so much.
Well, a lot of people don't realize, too, for independent authors especially, they have to do their own promotion, and they're very dependent on reader reviews.
Yeah.
So I'll be listening tonight. write a review now and again, even if it's, nothing more than it was a good book, period, I liked it, period. That's better than nothing. Granted, you never get a vote for being the most helpful review, but that's okay. But sometimes, even one review that says that is better than no reviews at all. Because, like I said, independent authors, they do their own promotions. They set up their own interviews. They, they work very hard to make their books known and available to their readers or potential readers. And it's not an easy process for independent authors at all. Now, in a traditional publishing scenario, that's taken care of by the publishing house, and there's publicists involved. And I actually work with some publicists. They'll contact me and say, such and such a book is out. It's about such and such. Are you interested in doing an interview? Do you want a review copy? And I can say A or nay. And that sort of publicity is not available to the average independent author, although there have been some that have achieved fairly good success and can then afford to hire a publicist to work on their behalf.
I don't understand how that happens for indie publishers, because writers are writers. They aren't marketers, and they aren't necessarily promoters.
No, they're not.
I'm having a little problem with that, because it is so time-consuming to do the promotional work and the marketing of a book when a writer really wants to be writing and not marketing and promoting. So I think that...
And that's very, very true. And something publicists play on when they are, you might say, trying to court a writer is the fact that they'll no longer have to do that part. Because most writers find that less than fun. It's hard work.
Fun. It's so time consuming. I mean, it really, really is time consuming. And it's time that, you'd rather be writing. You'd rather be doing your work.
Right.
So kind of catch too. It's like, you want to write to get it out to the public. You've got to promote so that, market your book so that people know that it's available. But then it takes huge amounts of time away from the creative process. So it's tricky.
And all the things that, because there's material out there that tells you, this is how you do it. You can read that material, but I've been blogging for years. Blogging and social media can suck away your life.
Exactly. Exactly what I'm saying.
This is life, not that I've had to do that, but, it can easily suck away your life. And so when you realize that you are sacrificing writing time to do these promotions, and then you're kind of going, does it really do me that much good? Does anybody really care? And yeah, I could see where that would be, because I know my own frustrations with the entire process. It's like, how much do I feel like beating my own drum today? Because
I was just going to say that. And that's another thing too, is that when you're an indie publisher and you have to promote yourself, for some of us it's very, very difficult to toot our own horn. Very difficult. It's actually, for me personally, it's embarrassing. It is really embarrassing. Like, I just want my book to stand, Just let it stand. But, I mean, it won't get out there by itself.
I think for women, having talked to male and female authors, I think for women, the self-promotion thing is a little bit more difficult, because I think, especially those of us who are over, 35, 40 years old, culture said, nice girls don't brag.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was drummed into your head. Nice girls don't brag. Well, guess what the heck self-promotion is? You need to be the biggest braggart on the block.
Exactly.
And that
doesn't feel comfortable.
No. No.
Well, not to me.
And, you know, if you don't have one of these cheerleader personalities, happy, happy, joy, joy,
Yeah.
then it can be even more agonizing. Or if you're shy. Yeah, I can see all the potentials because I've been staring at a few of them the last few months myself. And, you know, that curiosity about how do other authors cope with things.
Maybe,
how do they tell their
I just had an idea. Maybe writers should pair up and promote one another. So let's say you have like a promoter partner, and they brag about your stuff, and you brag about theirs, and you do it for each other. That might be easier. Because I have absolutely no problem.
Because I can brag the heck out of somebody else.
I can brag the heck out of someone else for sure.
You want to hear me?
I mean, if I truly believe in their work, you know.
Yeah, and that's a key too. For most of us, we have to believe in what we're doing.
Yeah. Exactly.
You know, I know that you know, we've all heard about celebrity endorsements where the celebrity themselves would never ever dream of using the product they've been endorsing. But for most of us, we're not celebrities,
we're not like that.
And our product endorsement.
We're not like that. Yeah,
no,
we're not like that.
You know, whether I'm reviewing a product, a book, or whatever, they're going to get my honest opinion, good, bad, or indifferent. Although, I have discovered that since I wrote a book myself, I maybe am a little bit kinder when I have a less than positive review to write than I used to be. That's the one change I think maybe that has happened. Sometimes there's no nice way to say, look, this thing really stunk. And, please don't make me ever read it again. But, sometimes they do need to be written. Especially on the ebook front, occasionally you'll encounter a book that, you just wish the author had cared enough to be bothered with the book that they wrote. And, I guess that kind I don't feel is bad about giving a less than thrilling review, too. So, yeah.
Sadly, I'm not in that position. I don't need to write reviews if I don't want to. And, if I'm not interested, I just won't read the book.
Even though I liked your book, and even though my review is positive and it's truthful, I will confess that it was the most difficult book review I've ever written because there was so much going on in the book. And trying to figure out how to say what I thought without writing another book itself, wasn't easy. I put more thought into writing that book review than I probably do in the average dozen book reviews I write. More thought, more effort. Because usually a book review is just a couple of minutes of my time. It's just, I like the book, this is what I liked about it, or, this is where I think that it could have been better, or whatever I want to say. Usually that's real quick and easy for me. I've got the gift of gab. Just letters on the screen, it's the same thing. And for yours, it was like, no, there was more going on. It deserves more than just it was a good book. Read it yourself. Letter from camp sort of writing. And then that's the thing is that the book reviews sort of leave a footprint of what people thought and felt about your book. And sometimes you want to leave a more distinct footprint, I guess. And in your case, that was definitely the case. It needed to be more than just it was an enjoyable book, read it yourself, because there was a lot of things to say about it. Now, we are getting down to the last few minutes of the program. So would you like to tell everybody where your website is and the title of your book again?
Yes. The title of the book is Dawn-of-Shades, and its website is www.dawn-of-shades.com. That's JAHNASLEEP.com. there you have it. And it's available at Amazon.
And you can find her at Amazon. It's a very good book. Is it also available? It's also available in printed form, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah. It's a pod publishing, so it's print on demand. So if you want hard copy, soft cover actually, you can order it at Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Smashwords or wherever it's available. At the website, if you order it at the website, you'll get a PDF copy.
Okay, and that makes sense too. Most of us can open PDF and read just fine.
And I think you can. I think it's possible to turn PDF into get it onto your readers. I still haven't quite figured out how to do it, but I know that it's possible.
I know it's possible too. I have read how to do it. I have not done it, mostly because I don't have a reader. One of these days I'll make up my mind which one I want and go ahead and get it. But in the meantime, reading it on your computer screen, for those of you who aren't real sure about the whole reader idea, that's a great way to try it out in all of, the Barnes & Noble Nook, Kobo, Kindle, and I'm sure there's some other ones out there.
Yeah, a bunch of them, yeah.
They all have applications that you can put on your PC and usually your smartphone as well. So it gives you a chance to see what you think about ebooks. You may grow to love them, like I did. The first one I wasn't, I was like, I don't know. The second one I liked a bit better, and now I've got over 3,000 books in my library. So yeah, it'll grow on. And best of all, it is good for our environment.
Exactly.
So
and good for us travelers.
Yes. So, folks, with that, we have run out of time once again. I hope that tonight's program has given you some entertainment as well as plenty of food for thought and more illumination for your personal journey towards truth. Tune in again next time as we bring another guest, another topic, and a whole new idea as we have our last Author Conversation Series program. You've been listening to the Dawn-of-Shades, and I'm your host, Gia Scott, and good night.
From sea to shining sea throughout the solar system and extending to interstellar regions beyond, this is the Kevin Smith Show.
Comments and views expressed on The Kevin Smith Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the views of Kevin Smith, The Kevin Smith Show, or its affiliates or sponsors.
Hi, folks, and welcome to the Kevin Smith Show, whoever you are, wherever you happen to be, all around this beautiful place we call Earth. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And